So as I've already been fairly sorely disappointed by the A500 Plus that I've just been working on, there's been another video if I actually even put the video up. I thought I'd have a look at this A500 that I'd acquired a while ago. I'll just put some of this back as it was. So I was going to just get on with this off the camera, but I thought, well, we might as well record it. This didn't come with a trapdoor, I don't think. Or no, it did, or it did, and it was broken. I can't remember which. This had got like a second seal put over the top, which was sealed, so I don't know if it's been serviced and then resealed with a warranty sticker. And the same on the back here. So I've removed that, removed the screws. You may notice on the back here there's quite a lot of rust on the shield. It's very brown. Usual yellowing. This is the one that got damaged in the post as well. It was the one with the box that was too small. The damage on this isn't quite as severe, but yes, I'm not quite sure what. Slightly different version of keyboard there actually. 2 ribbon cables on it. Again, it's the green and the red LED version of the keyboard. Whether this will work, I have no idea. That's one of the things I thought I might as well find out. I've already started to bend up some of the clips on the shield, and as you can see, this is quite rusted on this back here. And there's some bits of plastic floating around, probably because of it being damaged. This RAM expansion. I did say that I suspected there would be corrosion on here, and you can see quite a bit. There's a wonderful Varta battery there, and this is all corrosion along here. This switch I said was stiff, and it does move now, but it was stuck. Not quite sure what that is. It's like a trimmer pot there, some kind of variable resistor or something. Also not looking in very good shape. The chips don't look too bad. Not even the traces. But obviously some of these components here have been utterly destroyed by the looks of it. I don't know if they're resistors or capacitors or what they were, to be honest. They're in a right state. So that will need looking at and seeing if it's salvageable. The good thing is with this, with it being a 500, the battery's in this compartment here, so it's separated from the main board, so that may help us. Although this rust here is actually a bit of a concern, to be honest. It's quite bad. So I'm just going to strip this down and open it up and see what's inside. See how bad things are. So whether this has got wet or it's condensation, obviously something's happened for it to get this bad. Oh yes, unfortunate. We've got corrosion down here on the main board by the looks of it. You can see down here, it's, the copper's being eaten away, and along here some kind of, whether that's, it's potentially that could be battery related, but I think this is more likely to be to do with water damage. That's a shame. Whether this will work, I don't know. I don't even know whether I should try and fire it up or not. I'm going to have a look underneath first to see what the state of things are on the underside of the shield. But this could be near impossible to free because it could be corroded on. That won't budge. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Let's get this floppy drive off to start with. The button on the floppy drive, the eject button, is not looking too good either. No surprise, because it's been smashed around in a box that was too small. How am I going to get this out with the memory expansion still inside? Am I going to be able to sort of lever this out an unconventional way? No. Okay. So that's a bit of a problem. I don't know if this is likely to work, probably not. I'm just going to see if I can pry two of these against each other to force this apart. No, that's really... Let's direct that a bit more. This is really corroded onto here. Yeah, that's not good. Okay. And looking at this here, actually the corrosion is so bad that it's eaten all the way through these pins, and these aren't exactly thin pins, some of those. I think what I'm going to do, because this is going to need replacing anyway now, looking at the fact that one of the pins is completely corroded, chances are the traces on the board are going to be corroded unless the coatings manage to survive. I'm going to chop this off, and I do have some 90-degree pin strips here, so I could replace them. I mean, these aren't gold plated, but they're also not corroded. I mean, yes, it may be possible to soak this off in some way, but would I trust the connections of it on the pins anymore? It's just not worth it. I think sometimes you're better off just getting rid of things and, you know, redoing them. So I've cut these pins on this edge here. Obviously I'm going to also need to be able to try and get at the other pins somehow, which are nearer the circuit board. So I'm now going to cut along these again and cut the rest off flush with this black plastic, and being careful not to end up with them in my eyes because they're flying off. And this corrosion's just everywhere. I'm not sure what this would be, a 0.5 meg expansion, I'm guessing. It's an A500, so it'd be 0.5 meg plus a 0.5 meg in the trapdoor. I do actually have another RAM expansion that doesn't have any chips, so it may be possible to even just pinch the chips off of this and repurpose or recycle that way. These lower ones are going to be more tricky to get at because they're quite close to the PCB. And the traces may be at risk of being damaged by snipping. The traces may actually be gone anyway, to be honest. Missed one. So if that's going to focus well, that's a bit of a mess there. There's a lot of crust and corroded crap on that. I'll just use this tub as I turn this over and look at all. Oh, green wasn't the best choice of plastic container to show this up, but you can see all the corrosion there. In all honesty, the traces don't look too bad on this, so it must have a good coating on it on the board. So, you know, this may be salvageable. Looks like they're actually diodes in all this crust. Yeah, they're diodes. The crust had just built up on the glass for some reason. Obviously this coating's coming off here, and we're getting the solder mask's coming off, and we're getting the raw tracks, either copper coated or the tinned. That actually looks tinned. Not too much on the chip there. I guess the other thing to be snipping off while I'm snipping is this the culprit. So yeah, that actually may be salvageable. Just, you know, say replace this connector. Obviously I'm going to have to replace the connector on the board if I can't get this off, or even if I do get this off, these pins may be quite badly corroded as well. It's going to be easier now. Obviously I'm now in a position where I should be able to get this out, hopefully. Even this is proving to be difficult. And corrosion seems to have the rust of the steel shielding, which seems to have stuck this to the casing. There's no screws in this thing. Quite incredible, really. Don't really like to do that, but that was the only way that was coming off. Yeah, so this is not in good shape. So the next step's obviously going to be to get all these off the back here, all these hex bolts. I've got a feeling that this particular one had been tested to some degree, or they powered it up and it lit up or something, maybe. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and revisit the listing for this one. It's not playing ball, that one. Just won't turn. I don't know if I really want to look at this. It's all stuck, all attached. So I'm just going to... I don't know which is worse, the inside of that or that. Yeah, you can see this. Clearly some kind of liquid in here, or let's say maybe it may even just be condensation that's formed. I don't know where this thing's been stored. So what have we got? Yeah, this lower end again is where the majority of the problems are. You can see it's, I don't know if the copper's gone or if it's just a discoloration of the surface. Actually, it's not too bad. The traces seem alright, to be fair, at a quick glance. Again, there's corrosion here on this edge. I'm guessing that the edges are getting attacked because perhaps any moisture or wet's getting in through the edge of the board and then working its way under the coatings. Yeah, so again, it's just some of this could be the vapour that comes out of the battery getting onto the board and etching, eating into it. Some of this is clearly just to do with water. Yeah, this was something I noticed on the Plus board that the A500 Plus that I was looking at earlier. The graphics chip is an 8362R8, which is actually an A500 Plus. Oh, sorry, an A500. I think it's CDTV and an A2000 chip. It's the OCS chipset. So that, as far as I'm aware, wasn't an A500 Plus chipset. So that absolutely proves to me that someone's just bunged a load of crap on that 500 Plus system and sold it on. I don't think it's going to be possible to get this off. This RAM socket, certainly not very easily. Just try and get a bit of a grip and twist it a bit either way, just to loosen it, even one edge. That's loosened a bit, and perhaps tease it off, but it's solidly on, that is. Fortunately, this angle is likely to start causing pins to be bent. Yeah, you can see here where the plastic's broken away, the corrosion's gone quite deep into this socket. So I would expect the ends of some of these pins to be a little bit on the green side. That's actually starting to free up now. Now that's come off, and it's well, it's difficult to see, but there is green inside of there. This isn't actually, this edge connector, this pin connector is not as bad as I expected actually, so I might just have to straighten some of these pins out a little bit here. I've put a bit of a curve in them, unfortunately, by shoving the screwdriver down there, but I needed some way of getting a bit more leverage on that. So the pin head is actually probably salvageable. Minor bit of damage to the plastic. So I think I'm just going to try and fire this up and see what we get. I don't think any of the corrosion's bad enough to affect it powering up, so we'll give it a go. And the keyboard, and that's clicking up. We've got the red power light. And it's booting. Sounds a little rough, but there's no surprise with the state of it. Oh, this is obviously not going to boot properly because this is a Workbench 2 disc. This is Kickstart 1. We'll try something else. So that appears to have gone through some kind of boot up sequence. So what I've done is remove the Indivision from the 500 Plus, And I'm going to try it on the 500. See if we get a picture. And again, I've noticed there's a bit of a misalignment with some of the pins when the chip's been pulled out, and again also the sockets, some of the holes on the sockets don't look particularly great. Well, this isn't going to be any good for these chips, and they're a bit too big. Yeah, so I've pushed one of these pins back into the centre of the socket. I think I actually might have overdone it, so that's possibly going to be a problem now, but we'll have to see. So let's get this riser in place for the ECS, the Indivision system, not the ECS. The Indivision board onto the riser. The pins that actually go from the Indivision board to the riser aren't particularly long actually. I do think they'd be better if they were a bit longer, be a bit more stable. But and obviously also need the cable hookup, VGA. So getting an individual computer's logo and a rather blue looking Amiga DOS screen. A lot of interference on the image as well. Okay, so I'm getting somewhat better colours on the workbench screen now, but there's definitely some kind of corruption. Whether that's a RAM fault, it's quite possible. So this is the A500 system booting up now, getting the Indivision logo. We've got a workbench screen. You can see on there's clearly some kind of problem because we've got lines on it, the colours are all over the place. And interestingly, as I move the mouse, that seems to affect this. You can see this sort of a shimmering effect on the floppy disk there. So I don't know if this is some kind of RAM fault, I'm guessing maybe, or perhaps there's a trace that's not quite right that's causing an issue. There's something wrong, but I would say, you know, this kind of weird graphical glitch is usually a RAM fault. And this is moving the mouse around, and there's no actual mouse pointer on the screen at this stage, so that's quite odd really, very odd behaviour. I didn't notice it on that screen initially, but what I did notice was when I was booting this floppy disk up, as you'll see, it initially didn't come up like that, it came up like this blue. So I move the mouse, you get this blue, and the white isn't properly white, it's got a blue tinge to it, and you can perhaps see there's like little flickers of interference. It looks like interference flashing up everywhere, but I think it's glitches rather than video interference. And again, if I move the mouse around, you can see it's all over the shop, and the mouse cursor's got like a chunk missing in it and then an extra line that appears. So there's something not quite right with this 500 system, but it's booting and it will run. So out of interest, I've swapped out the Denise chips and tried the 3 that I've got here on the individual computer's board. Now what I've realised is that you don't even need the chip in, because obviously the way this board works, it sort of sits on the socket or between the socket and the chip, intercepting all the video processing that's going on. I think that's how it works, and then it outputs its own signal. That's one of the reasons, even when the A500 or 500 Plus isn't working properly, you still get a splash screen out of this, because this thing sort of runs its own system, so you'll still get video output for that splash screen regardless if the rest of the machine's not fully functional. And what that actually means is you can run it without a chip and you get a display output, which I thought was quite interesting, because it means if you just want to run an A500 from a more modern monitor and you've got a faulty Denise chip, you don't necessarily have to replace it, because I don't think, certainly for the Plus versions, I don't think they're that cheap to get hold of anymore, at least eBay prices, but that's probably nothing to go by. So I think all things considered with this one, it's not actually too bad. I mean, yeah, the corrosion's not great, especially the underside, it's a lot worse. I'm not sure if this is to do with damp or wet, or if it is actually the battery corrosion that's got sort of across here and under, but I find it strange that it's not affected other areas of the board, if that's the case. And as you can see, the shielding on this is not the best. It's very rusted up on the top here, along that edge there, and you can see on the plastics where it's, this is why I think it was difficult to get everything out. It just sort of stuck itself to the plastic casing, and the inside is really not great at all. It's quite rusted up down where the ports are and the corners, and that's what makes me think this is not necessarily down to battery damage. The keyboard on this one will also need looking at. This is actually one of the keyboards without the springs in. I'm not sure, I know there's different versions. So this is one that wouldn't work with replacement keycaps, because I think these are slightly different sizes. The posts in the middle of the keys, from what I understand. But luckily this keyboard's not got damage, so I'm hoping any issues with key presses can be resolved just with a good clean up, strip it down and whatnot, and that will at least be usable. The floppy drive's a bit rough, but it works, so I think again it probably just needs a good clean up. There's a bit of corrosion on the top and that, but it works. The buttons come off, these often end up coming off, or little bits of plastic break off that they use to latch on to the side. This was also damaged in the post. This was sent in a box that was too small, so there was virtually no packaging. It actually broke out of the box, but the damage on this is pretty superficial, especially compared to the other ones. Just some chip into the corners, it's hard to see on the camera, and the back here, but nothing major, so this casing is probably usable. It's a lot more yellow than the other one, and obviously there's this mess from the RAM expansion to deal with. It was a bit brutal really the way I removed this in some respects. I did think afterwards if I'd have cut the pins a bit longer I might have been able to pull them, left that on and pulled them out of here individually, but I'm not so sure that would have been an option. I think something had to be done. 'Cause the pins are a little bent up. I think shoving the screwdriver down that way and leaving that was a bad idea. I should have just done the plier trick that I did to just gradually tease that off. That was the way to go about it. But I can straighten these out, straighten this plastic bit up here, and just straighten the pins out generally. That should be fine after a clean up. Unfortunately at the minute all I seem to be doing is finding all the problems and then packing everything away and not actually fixing the problems. But obviously when you receive one of these, the first thing you really want to do is get it open and assess it, especially when you've got the risk of these things being flapping around inside here doing the damage that they do. So yeah, this is mostly functional, it boots up. Other than that potential RAM issue or whatever it is, this seems to be working fine. So it's just a case now of trying to find the time to clean this up and sort it out before any of the corrosion gets any worse, and then fix whatever issues there are with it.